The Senate chamber is alive with the hum of tension, voices clashing, but it all falls silent the moment Josh Hawley rises from his seat. He stands tall, his eyes cold, a calculated sneer spreading across his face. The cameras flash, the murmurs fade, and in the stillness, every word he speaks feels like a calculated strike. "Let's be honest," Hawley says, his voice sharp, dripping with arrogance. "The vice president has been nothing more than a token for this administration. A distraction. A figurehead." The room tightens with unease. Harris's eyes flicker for the briefest of moments, but her expression never wavers. She remains seated, her posture perfect, hands folded on the table in front of her. A woman in control, unshaken, unbothered by the jabs thrown in her direction. Hawley continues, his words like daggers. She has no real experience, no true understanding of what it means to fight for the people. The smirk never leaves his lips. And that's exactly why she's been promoted to the second highest office in the land. The air is thick with disbelief. Harris remains silent. Not a word. Not a flinch. Just a calm resolve. The room is watching, the nation is watching. And then, she speaks. Her voice cuts through the air like a scalpel. "The only thing you don't understand, Senator, is what it means to actually serve the people. To stand for something greater than yourself." For a moment, the room holds its breath. It's as though the very air has thickened. Harris's eyes lock with Hawley's, calm, unwavering, sharp. In that split second, the tension between them feels like it could ignite the entire room. And yet, her poise remains. The silence stretches. Hawley stumbles, visibly rattled by her composed response. The camera catches the twitch in his jaw, the uncertainty creeping into his gaze. Harris doesn't move an inch. What happens next will shake the very foundation of this debate, and the country. The Senate chamber is more than just a room of politicians. It's a battleground, a place where ideologies collide, where the future of America is debated, and where every word spoken echoes far beyond these walls. The tension in the air isn't just about this one moment, it's a reflection of a country teetering on the edge of something much larger. America is divided like never before. Red states and blue states, rural versus urban, progress versus tradition. The echoes of a fractured nation reverberate in every speech, in every argument. And in the heart of this chaos stands Josh Hawley, the rising star of the right, an embodiment of the populist movement that has taken root across the country. His bravado is his strength, his divisiveness his power. He has become a voice for the angry and disillusioned, the ones who believe America has lost its way. He speaks to them like a savior, promising to restore the nation to its former glory. The battle he's waging is about more than just policy, it's a war for the soul of America, and he's positioned himself as the leader of the charge. On the other side of the aisle stands Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, calm, dignified, and resolute. Her presence in the Senate is more than symbolic. She represents progress in a time when the nation feels stuck in its past, the embodiment of unity in an era of division. Where Hawley builds walls, Harris seeks to bridge them. Where he spreads fear and resentment, she speaks to hope and the possibility of a better future for all Americans. But this moment isn't just about two individuals. This is about the values they represent, the clash of two visions for America's future. Hawley's rhetoric thrives on fear and division. He paints the picture of an America that has been lost, a nation that's slipping through the fingers of its rightful heirs. He warns of a future where elites and radicals have destroyed the fabric of the country. To him, the people are a monolith, angry, united, and ready to reclaim what's rightfully theirs. His vision of America is a place where power is for the few, where divisiveness reigns, and where loyalty to party overshadows the nation's broader needs. Harris, by contrast, carries the weight of hope. She has spent her entire life fighting for equality, justice, and opportunity, for every American, no matter their race, gender, or background. Her role as vice president isn't just a political title, it's a testament to everything she has fought for, the breaking down of barriers, the lifting up of marginalized voices, the promise of an America that works for all. The Senate chamber isn't just a room where laws are passed, it's a mirror reflecting the struggles and triumphs of the nation. And as the debate begins, the nation watches, gripped by the realization that this is no ordinary clash. The stakes are higher than they've ever been. It's not just a matter of who wins this debate, it's a battle for the very future of the country. What happens here today will resonate beyond the walls of this chamber. It will shape the narrative of America for years to come. The battle for the nation's soul is happening now, and it's happening in front of an audience that is as polarized as the very ideologies that divide the country. The question is, who will prevail? Will it be the voice of division, or the call for unity? The answer to that question will shape the future of America. And in this moment, with the nation's future hanging in the balance, everything is on the line. What happens next changes everything. Josh Hawley wasn't always the populist firebrand he is today. There was a time when he was just another face in the crowd, a promising young politician climbing the ladder with the ambition to match. A lawyer, a Harvard graduate, and a political newcomer with a penchant for intellectualism. But ambition, like power, has a way of warping even the brightest minds. Hawley's political rise was quick. Too quick. And in his climb, he learned that it wasn't enough to be smart, or capable, or even well-intentioned. To truly rise in the modern political machine, he needed more. He needed an audience. A base. And so, he turned to the raw, divisive rhetoric that was sweeping the nation, leaning into populism, speaking to the fears of everyday Americans, and positioning himself as the ultimate outsider. He began to craft a narrative. America had lost its way, the elites had taken over, and it was up to him to return the nation to its rightful owners, the common folk. The forgotten men and women of this country, he would say, his voice full of faux compassion. People who work hard, who sacrifice, who are invisible to the establishment. His words resonated, especially in a country torn apart by economic inequality, cultural shifts, and the backlash against progress. He painted himself as the hero of the underdog, the voice for the voiceless. But there was a problem. The more Hawley spoke, the clearer it became, he wasn't really speaking for the people, he was speaking to them. His words were a mask, carefully crafted to hide the self-serving ambition behind them. Beneath the populist exterior, he was a man hungry for power, willing to use the pain and disillusionment of others to fuel his rise. His rhetoric was sharp, biting, filled with accusations of betrayal from Washington elites, but the truth was, he was positioning himself to join those very elites the moment he could. He cultivated a public image of toughness, resilience, and unrelenting devotion to traditional values. But his contradictions began to surface as his power grew. Behind the scenes, Hawley was a calculated strategist, willing to align himself with any force that would elevate him. His bravado on camera contrasted sharply with his private dealings, where he sought endorsements from wealthy donors, cozying up to corporate interests that were supposed to be the target of his populist wrath. He preached about draining the swamp but was more than willing to swim in its murky waters when it suited him. The contradictions didn't stop there. Hawley would speak passionately about the forgotten working-class man, but his policies often served the interests of the wealthy. He railed against the establishment while vying for its approval. He claimed to be the voice of the people, but in reality, he was just another politician chasing power, willing to say whatever he needed to keep the spotlight on him. To him, the forgotten were not so much a cause to fight for as they were a means to an end. His rise in the Senate was marked by his ability to manipulate the media and public opinion. He became a master of the soundbite, weaving narratives that made him appear as a champion of the real America, when in reality, his every move was designed to further his personal brand. The more the media flocked to his statements, the more his profile grew. And then, in the lead-up to the 2020 election, Hawley found himself at the forefront of a movement that sought to undermine the very democratic processes he had sworn to uphold. The Capitol insurrection was the crescendo of his years of divisive rhetoric. His refusal to accept the election results, his calls to challenge the legitimacy of a free and fair election, these were not the actions of a leader who cared about unity. They were the desperate actions of a man who would go to any length to hold on to his power. Hawley was no longer just a politician. He had become a symbol of everything that was threatening to tear the nation apart. But in this game of power and politics, there's one constant truth: hubris always leads to downfall. The cracks in Hawley's persona were beginning to show. His public bravado was starting to wear thin, and behind the polished speeches and the swelling crowds, there was a man consumed by his own ego. His arrogance, his inability to admit fault, his refusal to engage with the truth, these traits were beginning to isolate him, even within his own party. What started as a promising career built on populist promises had begun to sour, turning into a cautionary tale of ambition unchecked by integrity. And now, as Hawley stands at the center of the Senate chamber, ready to take on the personification of unity, there's an air of inevitability. His rise has been swift, but his arrogance, his self-serving nature, has already set in motion the events that will lead to his fall. The very traits that helped him ascend to power, his divisive language, his ability to manipulate, his disregard for anything but his own image, will be his undoing. The stage is set for a confrontation, and the question isn't whether Hawley will be taken down, it's how much further his hubris will carry him before it all comes crashing down. The room is about to witness a moment that will forever change the trajectory of his political career. The audience can already feel it: the downfall of Josh Hawley is on the horizon. And it's coming at the hands of the person he least expected. Kamala Harris didn't come from a legacy of privilege or power. She was born in Oakland, California, a city defined by its contrasts: wealth and poverty, opportunity and oppression, hope and despair. Her mother, Shyamala Gopalan, was a cancer researcher from India, a woman who, despite the barriers of race and gender, became a trailblazer in her field. Her father, Donald Harris, a Jamaican economist, taught her the value of education and the importance of standing up for justice. They were immigrants, driven by the dream of providing a better life, not just for themselves, but for their children. From the start, Kamala was taught that the world wouldn't make things easy for her. As a woman of color, the world was ready to tell her that she didn't belong. It was a message that society would send to her throughout her life, but it was also one that she was determined to reject. Growing up, she faced every challenge with grit, not as a victim, but as a force that could rise above. She was that rare blend of tenacity and intelligence, finding her voice not in spite of the world's limitations, but because of them. In college, at Howard University, she embraced her identity as a proud black woman. Howard wasn't just an institution, it was a statement of belonging, of ownership in spaces where people like her were often made to feel invisible. It was there that she honed her sense of purpose, understanding that her path would always be intertwined with the fight for equality. Her decision to pursue law wasn't a fluke, it was an act of defiance. It was the very system that had oppressed people like her for centuries that she would fight against. After graduating from Hastings College of the Law, she took on the role of prosecutor, entering a world that was as hostile as it was challenging for a woman, especially a woman of color. But Kamala didn't back down. She worked tirelessly, earning a reputation for fighting for the most vulnerable, taking on cases that no one else would touch. She stood up against a system that had always been stacked against people who looked like her, who came from neighborhoods like hers. In 2003, she became the first woman, the first black woman, and the first South Asian woman to be elected as District Attorney of San Francisco. She could have easily rested on her laurels, satisfied with the glass ceiling she had already shattered, but she didn't. She understood that real change was not about titles, it was about action. She created groundbreaking programs to combat recidivism, advocated for restorative justice, and fought for the rights of those who were often forgotten. Her rise wasn't about proving people wrong, it was about proving what was possible when someone committed themselves to a cause greater than their own. But the road was never easy. Harris wasn't just battling a system of injustice, she was battling the prejudice and sexism of a political world that wasn't ready for her. She was often forced to prove herself twice as much as her male counterparts. Her every move was scrutinized, her every decision challenged. It wasn't enough to simply be competent, she had to be flawless. Yet Kamala never wavered. She used every attack as fuel, every doubter as motivation. She was never just fighting for herself, she was fighting for every young woman, every person of color, every immigrant who dreamed of breaking through the walls of power. Her tenure as California's Attorney General was another chapter in her unrelenting pursuit of justice. Kamala didn't just rise through the ranks, she used every position to push for meaningful, systemic change. She fought for marriage equality, took on big banks that were exploiting Californians, and worked to ensure that no one, regardless of their background, would ever be left behind. She didn't seek headlines or accolades, her work was her testament, her impact was her legacy. But it wasn't just her career that shaped her, it was the principles she stood for. Kamala didn't just practice law, she practiced empathy. She saw her work as a mission, not a job. And it was this sense of duty that would eventually lead her to the United States Senate, where she would take on an even greater role in shaping the future of the nation. The political world had underestimated her before, but this time, she wasn't just there to break barriers, she was there to reshape the very system that had held people like her back. She knew that the fight for America's soul wasn't going to be won through politics alone, it was going to take moral courage, a willingness to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. By the time Kamala Harris was elected Vice President of the United States, her name had already become synonymous with resilience, with justice, and with the unwavering belief that dignity must always triumph over division. The first woman. The first woman of color. The first South Asian Vice President. But none of those milestones defined her as much as her dedication to the people she served. She wasn't a symbol, she was a leader, a woman who had spent her entire career proving that progress was possible, and that the fight for justice never ended. Now, as she stood in that Senate chamber, calm in the face of Hawley's provocations, Kamala knew this moment wasn't just another debate. It was the culmination of everything she had fought for. She wasn't just defending herself, she was defending the very values she had spent her life fighting for. The principles of unity, integrity, and equality were her armor. And while Hawley was poised to tear down what she had built, Kamala was ready to remind the world that dignity, truth, and service would always win in the end. In that moment, as she prepared to take on one of the most arrogant voices in American politics, Kamala knew this, she had been preparing for this her entire life. And when the time came, she would rise, not just for herself, but for every single person who believed in a future that was greater than the divisions of today. The Senate chamber hums with the electricity of anticipation. The air is thick, charged with the weight of what's about to unfold. Senators, staff, and cameras alike are fixated on the exchange that is quickly escalating between Kamala Harris and Josh Hawley. The room falls into a tense silence as Hawley rises, his posture stiff, his eyes focused with razor-sharp intent. "I think it's clear," Hawley says, his voice deliberate, laced with condescension. "The vice president doesn't fully grasp the gravity of what we're facing in this country. Her vision is nothing more than a pipe dream, a utopian ideal that ignores the very real problems of everyday Americans." Harris remains still, her face unreadable, but her eyes, those eyes, speak volumes. She isn't rattled. She isn't rushing to speak. She's a force of quiet strength, a calm in the storm that Hawley is only too eager to stoke. "Senator Hawley," she responds, her voice steady but sharp, "you can attack my vision all you want. But it's clear that you're more interested in stoking fear than addressing the root causes of this nation's problems." Hawley's jaw tightens. He's used to having the upper hand, to dominating conversations with his rhetorical flourish. But here, in this moment, he's starting to feel the sting of Harris's poise. It's not the challenge he expected. But he's not backing down. "It's easy to talk about unity, Kamala, when you've spent your career serving in the ivory towers of power. You speak of progress, but how much has actually changed for the people who need it most?" Harris's eyes narrow slightly. She's unbothered, but the faintest shift in her posture signals she's ready. "I've spent my career fighting for those who have been ignored and left behind, Senator. You, on the other hand, use their pain to fuel your ambition. Hawley's face flushes with a mix of anger and frustration. The jab cuts deeper than he'd anticipated. He takes a breath, forcing a smirk as if he's unfazed, but the tension in his shoulders betrays him. "You're all about playing the victim, aren't you?" Hawley shoots back, his voice rising. "You pretend to represent the downtrodden while living in the lap of luxury, surrounded by the very system that has kept these people trapped." The chamber shifts uneasily. This isn't just a policy debate anymore, it's personal. And Hawley's starting to make it clear that he's not interested in the issues, he's here to break Harris down, to provoke her into showing some crack in her calm armor. But Harris doesn't flinch. She leans forward slightly, her hands clasped together in front of her, maintaining that aura of composed strength. "I've spent my life fighting to dismantle the very system you claim to stand against," she counters, her voice unwavering. "I fought against injustice as a prosecutor. I fought for equality as Attorney General. I'm here, Senator, because I believe in this country's promise. Not the one you're trying to sell, where the powerful win and the people lose, but the one where we all have a chance to thrive, regardless of where we come from or who we are." The room goes quiet. Her words land with precision. Hawley recoils, his self-assuredness starting to unravel. He can't counter her with the same sincerity, his rhetoric feels shallow in comparison. The cracks in his bravado are beginning to show. But instead of retreating, Hawley pushes harder. "So, what's your plan, Kamala? More handouts? More government control? You'll never be able to make this country what you dream of, because the people know better. They want real solutions, not lofty ideals." Harris stays composed, even as the jab lands. Her voice doesn't rise, but her words cut through the tension in the room like a knife. "You don't get it, Senator. Real solutions don't come from tearing others down. Real solutions come from lifting people up, giving them the tools they need to succeed. You talk about real change, but you only want to change things for the few who can afford it. You've never been on the other side of that equation." Hawley's frustration boils over, his temper flaring. "You think you're the only one who understands struggle?" His words drip with mockery. "You've never had to fight for anything. You've always had the system on your side." A murmur ripples through the room. Harris stands as the calm center of the storm, unshaken by his insults. There's no panic, no defensive posture, just quiet strength. Her gaze locks with his, and for the briefest of moments, Hawley falters. It's a flicker, a hint of uncertainty, but it's enough to make him take a step back. "You want to talk about struggle, Senator?" Harris asks, her voice now lower, more pointed. "I've spent my life fighting for justice, fighting for people who've been ignored for far too long. I didn't rise to this position by tearing others down. I rose because I believed in the better angels of this country. But you, Senator, you've built your career by preying on the fears and divisions of the American people." Hawley's smirk fades into a tight line. His earlier aggression gives way to visible frustration. He's now the one who's struggling to maintain control. The room feels the shift. Kamala Harris is no longer just defending her position, she's taking back the narrative. The quiet strength that had been her trademark is becoming something much sharper. The tension in the chamber builds. Hawley can feel it. He's losing his grip on the debate. He knows, deep down, that this isn't a fight he can win with insults alone. But before he can recover, Harris delivers the final blow. "I'm not here to play games with you, Senator. I'm here to build something real. And if you can't see that, maybe it's time you step aside and let those who actually care about the future of this country take the lead." The room holds its breath. Hawley stands frozen, his face a mixture of rage and disbelief, while Harris remains composed, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. What happens next will determine who truly has the strength to lead this country. And the battle between them is just getting started. The tension in the room has reached a breaking point. The air is thick, every senator's eyes fixed on the two figures standing at the center of it all. On one side, Josh Hawley, his posture rigid, his face flushed with indignation. On the other, Kamala Harris, calm, composed, and unwavering. The scene is set for the inevitable confrontation, but as Hawley's final words echo through the chamber, something shifts. The room grows silent, the entire nation holding its breath. Hawley stands tall, his voice harsh and demanding. You stand there, Kamala, preaching about progress and unity, but you're just as entrenched in the establishment as anyone. You don't know what it's like to fight for the people, to be real with them. Your entire career has been built on the backs of the very system you claim to oppose. His eyes flash with anger, his rhetoric designed to provoke, to tear down everything she's worked for. You talk about lifting people up, but who are you really fighting for? You're part of the problem, not the solution. The room feels the weight of his words. Hawley's voice is growing louder, more aggressive. He's clearly hoping for a crack in her armor, an emotional response, a misstep. The crowd stirs, waiting for Harris to slip, to falter, to give him an opening. But Kamala Harris doesn't flinch. She doesn't blink. She stands, her posture graceful, unwavering. The calm before the storm. The camera zooms in on her face, capturing the sharpness in her eyes as she prepares to respond. Her voice cuts through the tension like a knife. Senator Hawley, she begins, her tone measured but laced with an unmistakable authority, I hear you. I hear your anger. I hear your frustration. And I understand it. The people you speak of, the ones you claim to defend, have been ignored for far too long. But here's the difference, Senator, I didn't build my career by demonizing people or fueling fear. I built my career by standing up for people, all people, who've been left behind by the very system you now claim to challenge. A hush falls over the room as Harris's words resonate. The senators, the staff, the cameras, they're all listening, drawn in by her quiet power. Hawley, who moments ago seemed untouchable, begins to shift uneasily in his seat. His eyes dart around the room, searching for an escape, for something to counter her growing presence. But he can't find it. I've worked with communities that you wouldn't know how to reach, Senator. I've fought for the most vulnerable, for those who have never had a voice in these chambers, Harris continues, her voice steady, but gaining in weight with each word. I didn't climb the ranks by throwing others under the bus to make myself look good. I climbed the ranks by doing the hard work. By earning the trust of the people who matter most. She pauses, her gaze never leaving Hawley. The room hangs in the balance, the energy thick with anticipation. You want to talk about real solutions, Senator? Let me tell you what real solutions look like. They don't look like dismissing entire communities because it's politically convenient. They don't look like stoking division and fear to build a base of voters who believe in nothing but their own self-interest. They look like affordable healthcare for all Americans. They look like breaking the chains of systemic racism that hold back millions of black and brown families. They look like providing opportunity to those who have been denied it for centuries. Hawley opens his mouth to retort, but the words die on his tongue. He's lost the rhythm, the momentum that had carried him just moments ago. Harris isn't playing by his rules. She isn't raising her voice. She isn't being pulled into his trap. Instead, she's dismantling everything he's worked to build, piece by piece, with the precision of a surgeon. Senator, you've built your entire career on the backs of those you claim to represent, Harris says, her words dripping with a quiet venom. You talk about the forgotten people, but who are you really serving? Not the working class. Not the disenfranchised. You're serving the wealthy donors who fund your campaign, the corporate interests that don't want to see the system change. You don't represent the people, Senator. You represent yourself. There it is. The truth laid bare, no sugarcoating, no spin. Harris's words hit like a sledgehammer, each one landing with undeniable force. The room is silent, too silent, as the weight of her response settles. Hawley's bravado crumbles. His smug expression falters, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. I've spent my life fighting for justice, Senator. fighting to ensure that the system works for everyone. All Americans. Not just the ones who look like you or speak like you or vote like you. But for every person, no matter where they come from, no matter what color their skin is, no matter who they love. And that's the difference between us, she continues, her voice unwavering, almost sorrowful. You've spent your career trying to tear us apart. I've spent mine trying to bring us together. Hawley stands frozen, his mouth opening and closing, but no words come out. His bravado has evaporated. In its place is a man caught in his own contradictions, his own hypocrisy. Harris has exposed him for what he truly is, a politician who uses the fears of the people to secure his own power, a leader who has lost sight of the values that once made this country great. The silence in the room is deafening. It's a collective realization that, in this moment, Harris has won. There's no need for a rebuttal, no need for more words. The mic has been dropped. The truth has been laid bare. The camera zooms in on Harris, capturing her serene poise as she takes a small step back. She's not triumphant. She's not gloating. She's simply, right. The room is still in shock, but the air feels lighter, like a heavy weight has been lifted. And then, slowly, the applause begins. At first, it's hesitant, unsure, then it builds, stronger and stronger, until the entire chamber is on its feet, acknowledging the undeniable power of her words. The crowd is on fire, cheering, applauding, shouting their support. Even those who had once been Hawley's allies are now giving him wary glances, unsure of how to react to the force they've just witnessed. Kamala Harris stands tall, unbowed, the calm center in a world that is anything but. She's not just a politician. She's a leader. A woman who has spent her life fighting for what's right, and in this moment, her strength, her dignity, and her unshakable belief in justice have turned the tide. As the chamber erupts in applause, the camera lingers on Hawley, his confidence shattered, his rhetoric now meaningless. Kamala Harris has not only won this debate, she has reshaped the narrative. The question is no longer whether she will lead, it's how far her influence will stretch. This moment. It's hers. And nothing, not even Hawley's bluster, can take that away. The Senate chamber had barely settled when the shockwaves of Kamala Harris's devastating takedown began to spread beyond the walls of the Capitol. It wasn't just a moment of political drama, it was the kind of moment that could change the entire narrative, the kind of moment that echoed across America and beyond. Within seconds, social media erupted. The hashtags began trending almost immediately, hashtag Kamala owns, hashtag Hawley destroyed, hashtag mic drop moment. On Twitter, the tweets poured in at a rate that was impossible to keep up with. One after another, people shared clips from the Senate floor, each one a different angle of Harris's poised, calculated response. The most viral clip, of course, was the moment she dismantled Hawley with surgical precision, her calm tone cutting through the noise. The post was shared by millions, garnering tens of thousands of retweets within minutes. The commentary beneath it ranged from admiration to disbelief. Kamala Harris just put every politician to shame with this one tweet read. Hawley should just pack it up after that, another said. The memes quickly followed. One featured Harris as a superhero, effortlessly cutting through Hawley's arrogance, while another showed a picture of a mic dropped from an impossibly high height, just as her words had done. The online world was ablaze, and the tone was unmistakably clear: Harris had won. The victory wasn't just political, it was personal, a message that would reverberate far beyond this single encounter. It was as if the nation had been holding its breath, waiting for someone to stand up to the growing tide of division, arrogance, and hubris that had gripped the political sphere. And Kamala Harris had done just that, with grace, dignity, and, above all, a forceful moral clarity. In the media, the story was everywhere. Cable news programs broke away from their usual lineups, devoting hours to analyzing the debate. What we just saw, one host said, her voice filled with a mix of awe and admiration, wasn't just a political clash. It was a statement. Harris didn't just fight Hawley's ideas, she fought his entire narrative, and she dismantled it. piece by piece. With elegance. Experts weighed in, praising Harris's composure under pressure, her ability to remain unflinching in the face of an opponent whose arrogance knew no bounds. Kamala Harris showed the world today that strength doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. She proved that leadership isn't about shoving your opinions down everyone's throats, it's about listening, reflecting, and offering solutions. Political pundits were quick to weigh in, too, and the contrasts were stark. Many on the left celebrated the moment as a definitive takedown of a dangerous, populist rhetoric that had swept through parts of the political right. They framed Harris as the embodiment of everything that was missing in today's political discourse: empathy, intellect, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. Some went as far as to call it the moment that would define the next election cycle, with Harris solidifying herself as a leader who could take on the worst of the right and emerge victorious. On the other side of the aisle, the response was markedly different. Supporters of Josh Hawley were in full damage control mode. Many took to Twitter to defend their man, claiming that Harris had only won by virtue of her elitist status, or her ability to use flowery rhetoric to avoid the real issues. They tried to push the narrative that Hawley's message resonated with working-class Americans, but the attempts to regain control of the conversation seemed weak and desperate. The hashtags #HawleyTheHero and #HawleyStrong gained some traction, but they paled in comparison to the momentum Harris had built. Celebrity reactions further amplified the divide. Prominent figures from across the political spectrum voiced their opinions, but most seemed to fall firmly on the side of Harris. "Kamala is a queen," tweeted actress Reese Witherspoon. Watching her dismantle Hawley was like watching someone perform brain surgery with a scalpel, so precise, so necessary. Even more conservative voices, who rarely found themselves in agreement with Harris, expressed admiration for the way she had handled the confrontation. Former Republican strategist and pundit Ana Navarro tweeted, "I don't agree with her on many policies, but that was a masterclass in political strategy." Kamala Harris doesn't just fight with facts, she fights with class. The viral moment was not limited to social media and TV punditry. It began to spill into real-world conversations. At dinner tables across America, people were talking about what they had just witnessed. Friends who had never once brought up politics now found themselves in heated discussions about the nature of leadership. "I don't care what your politics are," one conservative commenter wrote on Facebook, but Harris owned that debate. She showed what real leadership looks like. Even some of Hawley's most vocal supporters seemed to be acknowledging the weight of the moment, reluctantly admitting that Harris had won the battle. The ripple effect was immense. Political analysts predicted that the entire tone of the next election cycle had shifted. Where once it had been unclear whether Harris could truly stand up against the might of populist forces, now it was abundantly clear. She was more than capable. In fact, she had just proven that she was one of the most skilled political figures of her generation. For Hawley, the aftermath was nothing short of disastrous. In the days following the debate, his social media platforms were flooded with mocking memes, ridicule from every corner of the internet, and a series of damaging headlines. Political opponents jumped at the opportunity to capitalize on his failure, painting him as arrogant and out of touch. His once dominant narrative of populism began to look increasingly hollow as his own words were turned against him. His bravado, once his greatest strength, had become his greatest weakness. Within the walls of Congress, things weren't much better. Senators on both sides of the aisle began to distance themselves from Hawley, quietly distancing themselves from his divisive rhetoric. While some still rallied behind him publicly, the seeds of doubt had been planted. The debate had not just been a clash of ideas, it had been a personal attack on his character, and one that had left him visibly shaken. In the aftermath, Kamala Harris stood firm, her reputation stronger than ever. She hadn't just won a political debate, she had delivered a resounding message about what leadership truly looked like. The contrast between her calm composure and Hawley's crumbling arrogance was stark, and it wasn't lost on anyone. The fallout from that Senate debate would be felt for years to come. It had already rewritten the political narrative of the moment, and it was clear, Kamala Harris had not just defeated a political opponent. She had silenced his brand of fear-mongering with the quiet, unwavering strength of reason and dignity. And the world was taking notice. The room has quieted. The echoes of applause from the Senate chamber have faded, but the impact of what just happened lingers. The confrontation is over, but Kamala Harris isn't finished. With a calm, unwavering voice, she stands before the nation, not as a politician, but as a leader who has just delivered a message far greater than any political point. As the camera zooms in on her face, the weight of the moment settles in. This isn't about winning a debate, it's about reminding the world of something much bigger. The stakes of this exchange were never just about policy or personalities. They were about the values that have always defined America: unity, dignity, truth. Senator Hawley spoke of division. Harris begins, her voice steady, yet filled with a quiet power. He spoke of the fractures in this nation, the anger and frustration that many people feel. But what he failed to understand, what he missed entirely, is that the strength of this country has never come from division. It's come from our ability to unite, to come together in the face of our differences, to find common ground in the struggle for justice, equality, and opportunity. Her words are not just for the senators in the room, they are for every American watching. For the millions of people who have felt ignored, forgotten, or dismissed. For those who have been told that their voice doesn't matter. Harris is speaking directly to them, and they are listening. The challenges we face as a country are real, she continues. We are facing crises that demand real solutions: economic inequality, systemic racism, a healthcare system that leaves too many behind. But the solutions to these problems will never come from fear, from anger, or from turning against one another. They will come from empathy. They will come from standing together, even when it's hard. They will come from a belief in the power of truth over lies. There is a moment of stillness in the air. Harris's words are simple, but they carry the weight of decades of experience, of a lifetime spent fighting for the very ideals she's speaking about. She's not just a politician talking about issues, she's a woman who has lived through those struggles, who has faced the same challenges that many of her fellow Americans have. We cannot allow ourselves to be divided, Harris continues, her voice rising with conviction. We cannot let the politics of fear and hate dictate our future. We are better than that. We have always been better than that. Her gaze sweeps across the room, and for the first time, it feels as though she's speaking not just to the people in front of her, but to the nation as a whole. I have seen what happens when we give in to division. I have seen what happens when we let fear rule us. But I have also seen what happens when we come together, when we lift each other up, when we stand side by side to fight for justice and dignity for all. There is a palpable shift in the atmosphere. It's as though Harris's words are piercing through the noise, cutting through the cynical narrative that has taken hold of so many. This is more than just a political speech, it's a call to action. We are all part of this country, she continues, her voice softer now, but still strong. We are all connected by a shared belief in the promise of America. The belief that every person, no matter where they come from, what they look like, or who they love, deserves a fair shot. The belief that the values of equality, freedom, and justice are not just ideals, but the very foundation of our society. And if we lose sight of those values, we lose the essence of what makes us who we are. She pauses, letting her words sink in. This is the heart of the message, the reason she has stood her ground in the face of such provocation. This is not about her. This is about the future of the country, about ensuring that the next generation inherits a nation that is grounded in truth, justice, and unity. But the truth is, Harris says, her voice growing steady again, we all have a role to play. Every single one of us. We cannot sit on the sidelines and wait for someone else to lead. We cannot afford to be passive. We must stand up. We must speak out. And we must fight for the future we want, for the future that reflects the best of us. Her gaze hardens with resolve. Because the work is far from over. It is only just beginning. In that moment, Harris shifts from a politician to a beacon of hope. She is not just defending her own position, she is defending the very principles that this country was built on. Her call to action resonates not just with her supporters, but with anyone who believes in the values of freedom, equality, and unity. This moment, this exchange, it wasn't just about one debate, one political clash. It was about showing the nation what real leadership looks like, Harris says, her voice clear and unwavering. Leadership isn't about tearing others down or using fear to control the conversation. Leadership is about lifting people up, bringing them together, and reminding them of the strength we have when we stand united. It's about choosing truth over lies, hope over fear, unity over division. She steps forward, her words landing with undeniable clarity. So let me say this to you, to all of you watching, we are better than this. We are better than the politics of division and hatred. We are a nation that believes in the power of the people, and in the power of truth. And together, we will move forward. Together, we will rise. The room is still. The words have settled deep within the hearts of everyone listening. This isn't just an end to the debate, it's the beginning of something far greater. Harris has redefined the conversation, and in doing so, has reminded the nation of its truest values. As she takes a step back, the energy in the room shifts. It's no longer about winning a battle. It's about winning the future. And the audience, the nation, is already on its feet. They know that the fight for unity, truth, and dignity isn't over. In fact, it's just begun. The question posed from the beginning of this debate still lingers in the air: who will America choose? On one side, you have Kamala Harris, calm, dignified, grounded in truth and unity. On the other, Josh Hawley, an arrogant, divisive figure who thrives on fear and conflict. The stark contrast between them isn't just a clash of personalities, it's a clash of ideologies, of visions for America's future. In the aftermath of this confrontation, one thing is clear: the country stands at a crossroads. We can choose division, anger, and hate, or we can choose unity, dignity, and truth. Kamala Harris has shown us the power of standing firm in the face of provocation, of rising above the noise to speak directly to the heart of the American promise. It's not just about winning a debate, it's about leading with integrity and staying grounded in the values that make us who we are. This is a pivotal moment in American political history. And the choice, ultimately, is ours. Will we allow fear to dictate our future, or will we stand up for the future we believe in, one of hope, equality, and unity? As we close this chapter, I ask you to reflect: what kind of America do you want to see? What values do you want to champion? Kamala Harris has set the example, now it's up to us to carry that torch forward. If this moment resonated with you, if it inspired you, don't let it end here. Share your thoughts, your feelings, your hopes for the future. Subscribe to keep the conversation going and join the movement. Because together, we can ensure that dignity, truth, and unity will always prevail. It's time to choose. What will you stand for?